Good evening and welcome to the September 21st, 2023 meeting of the Economic Development Committee of the Fitchburg City Council. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and state your name and city of residence. Seeing none, at this time, I ask that all electronic devices be placed in silent mode. I invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to please approach the podium, identify yourself by name and address, and identify the agenda item on which you would like to speak. And then you may speak for no more than 2 minutes.
Jacqueline Wetchy, Fitchburg resident. I've already provided you with feedback on the economic development plan, and I won't rehash that, but I do want to mention something on the horizon to be aware of. There is a plan afoot in the city which is discriminatory and should be stopped. Now, I'm an immigrant because both I and one of my brothers are born in Canada. My mother was born in Germany. My late ex-husband was born in Haiti. I have nothing against immigrants. However, using tax dollars to purchase farms, which only immigrants and refugees are allowed to use, and not people born in the United States, is discriminatory. According to the Department of Justice, discrimination on the basis of national origin is illegal, and yet that is precisely what our Agricultural Commission is planning to do. Please keep your eye out for this project and do what you can to stop it. There are many other ways to promote agriculture, and the best one involve things like first-time buyer assistance programs so we can promote an ownership society. Part of the American dream is to own one's home, farm, business. It doesn't involve renting farmland forever as a tenant or as a modern-day sharecropper. Thank you for your consideration of this important matter.
All right. And I also received one public comment from the city clerk via email, and I'll read that now. It's from Ms. Jessica Jacobson of Fitchburg. City of Fitchburg, know who your partners are. Are they helping create good community spaces for all residents or just some? Are they really giving back to all the community? Do they do free skate days? Public skating, $7. Skate rental, $7. May not seem like a lot to some, but it can add up for a family, and the amount of times it may take that a family to go, I order for the kids to learn to skate, may not be affordable for many. But with the deal they got, why not offer Fitchburg residents some free skate days? They have a lot of space here. They have a big say in a lot of the public activities, events, and in the local politics. Looks like we leased it to FSU for 99 years for just $1. Is Fitchburg State really promoting neutral spaces and events for all residents, or is there some discrimination on a lot of the events they sponsor and promote within the city? Are they, as a partner with the city of Fitchburg, advising by the discrimination-free city policy? Our partners should be held to the same discrimination, free from all discrimination, something we are currently failing to do as a city. Okay, that closes public comment. And I will take a roll call tonight. Tonight present is Councillor Derek Cruz and myself, Andy Van Hazinga. We do not present a quorum of the committee, and therefore we will do no deliberation or cast any votes or make any decide anything tonight. Tonight's committee meeting is merely an opportunity for our Economic Development Director, Mary Jo Bohart, and our Community Development Director, Liz Murphy, to present an update on the 5-year city plan that was enacted 5 years ago in 2018. So they've been working hard on this presentation. We have some great information to go through. And now I would invite Economic Director Ms. Bohart to the podium, and please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Hazinga, and it's a pleasure to be able to report out on the ongoing economic development work that's been occurring in the city since 2018. It was actually October of 2018 when the City Council adopted the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which was the result of a year-long public planning process. So 5 years will be coming up in just another month. And the original vision for the plan was for it to be approximately a 5-year implementation, but not intended that every item would be addressed or fully completed in 5 years.
Sorry to interrupt. I
Yes.
just want to note that Councillor Fleming just joined us via Zoom, so we do present a quorum for the committee now. That being said, we
Thank
still
you.
do not have any action items that we will deliberate or take any votes. Please
Okay.
continue. Sorry for the
Thank you
interruption.
very much. Not a worry. So just to kind of put things in perspective, at the time, 2018 doesn't seem like that long ago, but a year and a half after the plan was adopted, the world changed dramatically as the pandemic hit, and we all experienced for the very first time a hard lockdown, and our businesses, large and small, had all sorts of crises to deal with and so on. I mention this simply because a brief chronology of kind of what led to this plan and then the implementation that we were actually in the thick of right when all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and then what we've done since. And so that's kind of how I'd like to organize things, if that's okay. And the good news is that some very important lengthy projects got completed during this period of this plan. I would say probably the most notable one was the zoning overhaul, and this was something that was a long time coming, and so it took slightly more than a year of work, and then going through planning board and city council approvals of various segments or sections of the overhauled zoning ordinance. That whole effort, and some of it actually went on virtually because of what was going on with the pandemic, but that whole effort concluded in 2022 when the final installment of changes to the zoning ordinance were put in place. The reason that we enacted these changes was because, and it was identified in the original economic development plan, certain aspects of our zoning were probably going to inhibit our ability to achieve our economic goals. And there were other reasons as well. But so it was very, very important for the city to achieve a major update of its zoning ordinance. So that was fantastic. Also, the Main and Boulder roadway project, which led to two-way conversion of the traffic pattern in the downtown, went through both design and construction during the past 5 years, and a good portion of that was during the actual hard lockdown aspects of the pandemic. So and one more thing that occurred, major project, was on our plan and occurred during the last 5 years, was the design, construction, and completion of the City Hall renovation and the building that we're in right now, what we now call the Legislative Building. And these projects, zoning, infrastructure, Main Boulder, and also City Hall project, you're going to hear references to them throughout me describing how the plan implementation has occurred. And the reason why is that so many actions that we do enable us to have other things happen. So I just wanted to set the stage a little bit. A lot of good has come since we've kind of come through the backside of the pandemic. Now we're in our, 3 years after it began. It feels pretty normal to us. A lot of our small businesses have gradually recovered. And so the work continues. And I just wanted to kind of frame that for everybody before I launched into a description of kind of section by section and how the implementation of our economic development plan has been going. One last thought, pandemic related though. There were some valuable takeaways both for the city and for our business community that came out of the pandemic. So often I find myself racking my brain, did anything good come from what we all experienced? Believe it or not while we were going through it, but afterward. And I think that we all recognized business retention is very important, but it was even more accentuated during the pandemic. And the reason why, it's easy for economic development folks to focus on recruitment, bringing in new development, new businesses, attracting, growing the tax base and things like that. But when the pandemic hit, retaining the businesses we had was job one. And some of the actions that the city took, deploying emergency mini grants in the very first few months of the pandemic to help some of the smallest businesses weather through as they were trying to make their rent payments without being fully opened or some not opened at all. So retention of businesses being equally important to attracting businesses. And we knew that, but it really, it drove the point home. Another, virtual meetings, which is now quite normal, but it wasn't 3 years ago. And then also, it isn't just for the ease of a public meeting, but also businesses who want to participate. Sometimes it's regulatory hearings. They're now able to be hybrid. They might be in person. They might be, we've had a number of restaurants when they went through liquor licensing, they were zooming in from, a storage room or something like that because they're on their workplaces. So virtual meetings and virtual participation, I think, is actually something very good that's come from this that is helping our business community. Another thing, entrepreneurialism really spiked during the pandemic. Now, you might say it's out of necessity. A lot of people were rethinking their lives, their career paths, and so on. Be that as it may, a tremendous amount of entrepreneurialism, new startups of small ventures, people rethinking what they were planning on doing occurred during and after the pandemic. And like I said, major projects still, the show must go on, so we continued with our work. Let me begin by explaining, with the Economic Development Strategic Plan and the process that we went through that's often called SWOT, or Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats. It's a common approach used when looking in a holistic way, and then before starting to think through what are our best assets, and what makes Fitchburg unique in all the region, and where should we put our economic development emphasis. And that deliberative process was something that we were led through by a consultant, and was actually UMass Boston's Collins Center. And the Commonwealth paired us with them, and they were the consultant through this economic development planning process. There was a vision statement, and it's very simple, but when you hear it, it actually does capture what makes Fitchburg unique and different. And the vision statement that came out of the strategy process, which is very broad, Fitchburg offers the amenities of urban living and surrounded by a picturesque rural landscape. So think about that. And I often find myself explaining this, whether it's to people thinking of buying a property or people looking to locate a business, and they may not be as familiar with our city. And I often have to explain, we have a number of different characteristics where we can be very urban in our historic core, we can be extremely rural in our periphery, and suburban in the in-between. So it really is a city that offers a variety of different experiences. And that came through in the vision statement that was a result of this planning process. So very broad vision statement. And from that, 8 sub-goals. Now, I often think of them as themes or focus areas, but the term that the document describes them as sub-goals. 8 sub-goals emerged, and these were really our defining elements, things that make us unique in the region, our strengths, areas that we want to grow or focus on as we nurture our economy. First, downtown. We have a traditional historic downtown with beautiful architecture and a variety of characteristics that a lot of other communities don't have. And it has to do with how we were founded, the age of our city, and so on. So there is a whole section of the plan that is focused on downtown and a series of actions related to the downtown district, strengthening it and making vitality and that sort of thing in the downtown. So downtown. The second sub-goal area that is defining for us is university town, kind of / education. But really, what it means is we're a university city. And when you go to such communities that have a university, they tend to have a unique vibe. We do, but that's something we want to nurture and we want to have more of. So university town, education, that is one of our themes or our sub-goal areas that you're going to hear an awful lot about. Family-friendly emerged repeatedly as a theme that already exists, and it has to do in part with, the folks that choose to live here to raise children and raise a family, and also some of the amenities and the activities and the institutions that are here. Fitchburg is particularly family-friendly oriented, and even in some of the events that we host and so on. So you're going to hear a number of economic development actions that are rooted in us really nurturing being a family-friendly community. quality housing stock. And I should add, the plan was devised before the Massachusetts housing market. I mean, yes, there was always the high cost of housing, particularly in the eastern part of the Commonwealth. But if you recall, during the pandemic was when it really started, all the prices of housing, both purchase and rental, really started to skyrocket in all parts of the state and beyond. So we weren't really speaking as outwardly, and when I say we, I don't just mean Fitchburg. I mean people in Massachusetts, elected leaders, people in the country. The words housing crisis really started to be used a lot as we were going through the pandemic. People were in hard lockdown, rethinking their careers, and sometimes selling their homes and buying a home in a different type of community where maybe they have a different quality of life and they can work remotely or whatever. And we saw it here in Fitchburg. So quality housing stock, or the theme of housing, is a sub-goal area that's very, very important to economic development. And some people might not realize when you speak about economic development, housing is right there too, for a lot of reasons. If we don't have an ample supply of a range of housing types, it can actually inhibit our local economy. So anyway, you'll be hearing more about housing. Mix of businesses is a theme or a sub-goal area, very broad, but it really gets at having a variety of different business types. Some serve the consumer, some of them are employers, they might be manufacturers and so on, but we have a whole section dealing with the range of business types that we seek, the ones that we have, and where we're heading with regards to our mix of businesses. Also, there is a sub-goal area on distinct neighborhood commercial districts. And what that really means is we are one of those communities that's so fortunate to have very distinct commercial districts. We also have distinct residential neighborhoods, but for this context, we're going to speak more on the commercial side of things, distinct neighborhood commercial districts. And that is one of the sub-goal areas, has a number of actions that are associated with it. We also have a sub-goal area, commercial recreation and culture. So arts and culture, commercial recreation, we've kind of blended the two together. These are, and the reason they've been put together as a sub-goal jointly is not only are commercial recreation and arts and culture things that we who are here locally enjoy, these are things that bring visitors and tourists. And you're going to hear more about how that can be an economic driver for us as outside visitors and tourists come to our city, and we get the economic benefit of their spending power as well. And then the last of the 8 sub-goal areas, these thematic areas, is transportation. So I didn't want to take too much time to set the stage, but I think it's important, and I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but those 8 sub-goal areas led to 183 actions, very specific things. I'm not going to detail and go through 183 actions specifically this evening in my verbal delivery. However, in the materials that I've prepared, which will be available on the city's website and linked to those who want to view the program at another time, you want to dig into it because these very specific actions under each of these thematic sub-goal areas, this is really revealing the work that has been underway, and you'll also have the opportunity to think about what's missing. Is there something else, in addition to all of this, that we also want to, maybe the world has changed or a few things around us have changed. So this plan was a snapshot of kind of the moment it was crafted looking forward. But there are a few things at the end of my presentation where I will hint at, and these are not exhaustive lists, but suggestions of maybe a few things that came up since the plan was adopted. And we might want to think about folding those into some of what we're up to. So I'll tease you now about that, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. So let me begin. And we're starting with the downtown section. And I'm not going to, there are 40 different actions associated with the downtown section as articulated in this plan. What I did as a notation, and you'll see it on the screen, and Liz Murphy, our Executive Director of Community Development, is going to not necessarily pull up the slides as I'm speaking with what I'm saying, but slowly kind of taking you through some of these downtown sections. You're going to see certain actions that have detail listed in green and maybe a check mark, and then sometimes you'll see portions or even a whole action that's in a kind of a royal purple. It may look royal purplish blue. And so what I'm intending with those is some of the work we were able to commence and even maybe complete in some examples. Some of it we commenced it and it's still ongoing, and some of it hasn't yet begun. And I think that as we report out on here we are 5 years into the work, I want to give you a notation. So when you look through the various sub-goal actions and you see each one, and they're numbered, and they have, their name and their headline and so on, but you're going to see green, you're going to see sort of a purplish color, and you'll see either a check mark or you'll see an arrow. And so that was simply my way of kind of helping us navigate through the work that is either completed or underway, and things that remain to be done. And there are plenty of things that remain to be done. With regards to the downtown, and I'm going to speak very broadly rather than getting into the nitty-gritty on it, safety, cleanliness, and attractiveness of the downtown was a sub-goal that had a number of actions beneath it. And when I show in the notation that a lot of these were green, it does not mean we're done. That's not what it means to say. It means that during the course of implementing the plan, we have tackled aspects of a number of these different things: expanding code enforcement efforts, facade improvements, evaluating roadway and sidewalk conditions, and that largely was addressed, at least in the downtown, with the main Boulder renovation project of the Main Street and Boulder Drive conversion. So those types of actions that come from within safety, cleanliness, attractiveness of the downtown, generally speaking, we are on our way. Probably one of the areas that in that particular sub-goal section where we're weaker is wayfinding. It was something, and it comes up in a number of sections on the plan. We know this is something where our downtown and the gateways into our downtown are still lacking. And by wayfinding, to give you a little insight into, I guess, what could be considered planner's jargon, but what we really mean are those types of signs that help you find your way to something that's special. It could be, if I'm a visitor and I'm not from around here, it isn't just one sign at a decision-making intersection, but kind of leads you to, maybe it's to the Upper Common, or it leads you to the university or so on. We have some wayfinding signs that were already installed throughout our city by Fitchburg Art Museum. You see them coming in from the west, you see them coming in from Route 12. So that's where a private, in this case nonprofit institution, has put up some wayfinding signs so their patrons who aren't from around here can find their way to the art museum. That's great, and actually the university has some wayfinding signage, and many of you have recognized it. You have used the university colors of the Kelly green with the gold, and they tend to be at major intersections, and they're not just telling people how to get to FSU. They're actually going a step further and saying this way to the airport and that way to downtown and things. So they're actually giving a little bit more wayfinding, but we as a city do not have extensive wayfinding signage that's comprehensive. So that's something that came up that really needs a bit more work, and we know that, so we'll be working more on that. Another thing within the downtown which we realize it needs to be figured out how to achieve it, is a downtown management organization. Sometimes you hear them called DMOs as an acronym, and they can be financed or funded in different ways. And so during the Transformative Development Initiative, or TDI work that Mass Development helped to fund with us in our downtown, we had the opportunity through a consultant to study different communities that have downtown management organizations and how do they structure them. And so we've done that explorative work, but in part because the pandemic was going on, probably in the height of all that work and so on, the timing wasn't quite right just yet to launch into a formal downtown management organization. But that's something that is for us to revisit, and so that you'll hear mention of it in different parts of the plan, but I just wanted to put that out there. We did support the creation of a downtown coordinator position, and this is something that's partially funded by the city through Community Development Block Grant, partially funded by the university, at least for now, in an initial state. And that individual does a combination of things. Some of it is events related, so a lot of the downtown events and festivals that have been, the programming that has been going on in the downtown, we're largely able to do a lot more of that, because in the past 2 to 3 years, we've had a lot more of that type of programming, because there is someone who is actually not just helping to organize, but also doing the promotion and the graphic design and the marketing related to those events. That same individual works closely with businesses. Some of our small businesses in the downtown need a little bit more marketing guidance, possibly with their social media presence, their website, just making sure that they understand, how best to reach their customers. And so having that downtown coordinator, and I believe we've had her for approximately 2.5 years. And so that's been very helpful. And that was something that was a recommendation in the plan back in 2018, and it took us a year or so before we were actually able to implement that, but it has worked out well because the programming in the downtown is more robust now, and some of the marketing of the events and things is more robust now. Another aspect of downtown that we continue to focus on is the mix of businesses, that we want. Certainly we have the ones that are already present, but we have a number of vacant storefronts yet to be filled as we work through the inventory, building by building, block by block with property owners. And so what types of businesses do we want to see more of in our downtown? And a lot of what came out in the planning effort was, and it comes through also in the type of community that we are, but also what we want our downtown to become, which is arts and culture, dining and nightlife, university community. And so those types of themes are basically the type of downtown that we are aspiring to, and it's taken a few years to start to see that work reveal. But now, for example, to forge or to foster a dining cluster that is regionally significant. This is something that takes time, does not happen overnight, and we've already had a number of businesses, dining related, open both in the downtown and throughout other parts of the city, just in 2023. So we have a very deliberative approach when interested parties seek to launch a restaurant business. We have a sort of a proactive way. We meet with them. We go on locations with them informally to help them to understand which spaces would need what. And that type of interaction has played out well, both for the site finding by that business and also navigating through the actual local approval process. So dining cluster, dining and nightlife, university town, once again, these are themes that you'll continue to hear. Another thing, access to the downtown through multiple modes of transportation. I'm mentioning it in the downtown section of this plan, but it also comes up in the transportation section, which is the 8th of these 8 different thematic areas. And so, we often think, obviously, with vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles. We actually have commuter rail, and with the creation of Phase 1 of the Twin Cities Rail Trail, we have a shared path corridor, which is off-road, which is yet another way to get to our downtown, and it will be used not just for recreation, but also for commuting, because as many of you know, the Twin Cities Rail Trail connects 2 downtowns, and so it has multiple purposes to it. Phase 1 has been completed. It concludes at least to the Phase 1 endpoint in our Patch neighborhood, but Phase 2, which will connect over the Nashua River and then to our intermodal transportation facility, has gone through design, and now the funding is in hand. And within the next year and a half, by 2025, we're going to see that Phase 2 in construction as well. So that's very important, because that's going to bring more transportation options for how people get into our downtown. We've already heard from a number of people that are not Fitchburg people, but they live in our region, and they use the rail trail kind of as a recreation, but then they come into our downtown, whether it's to go to one of our breweries or to go out to eat or anything like that. So the potential for the Twin Cities Rail Trail to also be used by visitors is yet another benefit. So that's something that we're very pleased with. As far as, I don't want to spend too much more time on the downtown because you're going to hear the downtown district come up as we work through some of those other 8 sub-goal areas. So let me move along to the Education University Town sub-goal. And with that, embracing Fitchburg as a role, our role as a university town, continuing to grow, our strong educational sector, forging a very fruitful town-gown relationship, as they call it, which fortunately we're very blessed through a lot of sustained effort that the university and the municipality and a lot of other organizations that work on the downtown efforts are very collaborative. And I probably should have mentioned that when I first began talking about this particular plan implementation, because a collaborative approach is something that we have been using in Fitchburg for, gosh, before this plan was even finalized, probably starting in about 2016. And that was when Fitchburg was selected by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston as a Working Cities Challenge community. And the only way that we could have that support and work with the Boston Fed was to have a collaborative group that was focused on our downtown. That's where it all began, and then that segued over a few years worth of work into what was called Reimagine North of Main. Maybe some of you had heard of that name for the group, which was basically our downtown working group of a number of downtown stakeholders. And more recently, when we've been working with Mass Development over the last 4 years, we rebranded what we had thought of as Reimagine North of Main into In-Town Fitchburg. So In-Town Fitchburg, sort of the identity of this downtown district. And we're still in very early stages of kind of rolling that out because wayfinding signage and other things would help define, when you're coming into the downtown, kind of knowing that you're there. But I just wanted to put that out there because the collaborative approach and the university as a really strong partner, it goes way beyond the fact that the university purchased the theater block and they've created the Idea Lab and they'll be renovating the theater, which is going to be amazing. All of those things are amazing. But even beyond that, the collaborative work in our downtown with the university has been something that we've been blessed with. It took a lot of years to probably forge those relationships, but we've sustained them, and it's really been quite good. So anyway, within the Education University Town, increasing the connection between FSU and the downtown and the city overall, that's not just a figurative connection, it's literal. So one of the things that the consultant for this plan emphasized was we really, really want the distance from our university to our downtown to be one of the most walkable, bikeable segments of the entire community. And it makes sense because if you visited other communities in Massachusetts that have universities and so on, ours is extremely close to our downtown. When you go to Salem State is there, but they're a little bit of a distance. And even in Framingham, they have Framingham State, but the distance between the heart of the community and the university is a little further. We're lucky in that our downtown is extremely close to the campus for FSU, but it's a work in progress for us to fully capitalize on the university students and the faculty and the employees there becoming part of the consumer base, which would support our downtown. So it's a work in progress. I think that one thing that new businesses, particularly dining businesses, ask me as soon as they settle here is they want to know how to capture the students. That's obviously, on their minds. And the university has a program they call the One Card, and many of you know about it. And it's where restaurants affiliate with it, and students, if they have a certain amount of money they put on this particular card, then they can ease of use go to different eateries and use it without having to think too much about it. So we definitely make any incoming new business, new restaurant, aware of that program with FSU. That's not the only way to capture students, but it's certainly one that we wouldn't want them to overlook. So anyhow, as far as the students once they graduate, we recognize that we want to retain, to the degree Fitchburg can, recent graduates, young professionals, people finishing up their schooling, whether it's at Mount Wachusett Community College or at Fitchburg State. We want them to stay in North Central, and we want them to do so in Fitchburg. So, so that's something you're going to hear it come up when I get into the quality housing stock section. But I wanted to put it out right now while I'm still talking about the university town idea. It isn't just university town for those who are actively still in school. Once they graduate, we definitely want to capitalize on having as many of those young professionals as they go out into the world choose to stay here. And so that is something that we're very focused on. And then I would say, let me segue on a little bit further, stepping away from the university town section just for a moment. I'm going to move on to family-friendly. And family-friendly, sub-goal, encouraging family-friendly businesses for locals and tourists, marketing our positive image of the city, highlighting amenities that Fitchburg has to offer. Family-friendly is for our local population, of course, but it also can be a source of, like I was speaking of earlier, tourists, or we often call people that are just coming for the day trippers, we would call them visitors. So, you know, when people that work in that field speak about tourists, it's often someone with an overnight stay, which is great. But some people might just come for the day. And so when you think about people from other parts of Massachusetts, and they come to Fitchburg, possibly to go to Hollis Hills Farm, and they're coming for the afternoon, maybe staying into the evening, or they're coming maybe to go to River Styx Brewing or Thirsty Robot or to a performance or something like that. So those are visitors, because they're probably a car trip, and they probably aren't going to be staying overnight. But that's something that family-friendly businesses, family-friendly experiences, fortunately, we already have a clustering of a number of family-friendly business types. And to give you an example of what some of them are like, probably the most obvious one, but this is, of course, much more for tourists, would be Great Wolf Lodge. That is one of our larger employers, one of our largest employers. And yes, it is for tourists, although some locals end up taking their family there as a special treat for an overnight stay and so on. But Great Wolf Lodge is not just a hotel, as we all know. It's a water park themed hotel that is extremely family oriented. And so when we think of family-friendly businesses, they can be small. They can be Fun Stuff Party Place on Route 12, Water Street, and that business is an experiential kind of indoor playland. It can be, you know, any of a number of different things. But so we're not just looking for businesses that have experiences that are family-friendly, but also the dining, too. We want a range of dining types, some of which would be very conducive to being family-friendly. So as we continue to market ourselves as a place that's family-friendly, part of what that leads us to is our quality housing stock, because sometimes the family-friendly qualities that we have cause someone to want to either buy a home here or rent an apartment here. And so when we speak of the quality housing stock in Fitchburg, we have a mixture of housing types, as you all know. In our oldest neighborhoods, whether it's in the College neighborhood, Clegg neighborhood, in our Patch neighborhood, and so on, we have probably more dense, smaller scale multifamily, whether it's 2 and 3 deckers, you know, that type of housing. We also have suburban scale housing. These might be single family homes in sort of our middle ring of our community. And then as you get to our northern and western and some of our southern perimeter, we have rural residential housing. So we have a variety of different housing types. Now, the reason this is so valuable for our economic development efforts is because whether someone's locating a business here or they're going to locate themselves here to live, or whether looking for a place to visit, we have a variety of different experiences that can all be had in Fitchburg. So with our housing stock, depending on what you're looking for, a variety of different experiences. Now, we said quality housing stock. So what does that mean? Well, we have older, we have buildings that are more than 100 years old. That's part of our history. So some of the housing stock may not be fully renovated at this time. One thing that we've seen, though, and this has happened time and time again, when we have had redevelopments of old historic properties, oftentimes industrial, and I'll use some examples to make it easier to understand. Fitchburg Yarn, which was a mill, and when that got redeveloped as residential, those apartments, once completed, leased up very quickly. Riverside Commons, repurposing of a mill, when those residential apartments were brought to market, modern renovated apartments, very quickly they leased up. Just recently, this summer, we were fortunate to see the completion of what is now known as the apartments at Morin Square, but locally we often called it the old Harper Furniture Building at 10 Main Street and the small Summer Street Firehouse, which was just one door down from there. And all of you have probably watched in Morin Square over the past year and a half while the developer did a very ambitious but very impactful transit-oriented, because it's so close to the MBTA commuter rail and to the MART bus hub, transit-oriented historic preservation. You have two historic buildings with new construction between, so it's transit-oriented, and it is a mixed-use, residential in upper stories, commercial on the ground level. Extremely successful, but it's complicated. And so that's quality housing stock, in this case multifamily housing, being brought to market. What we've observed is there is now not everyone moving in is necessarily all from Fitchburg, because these projects, when they get completed, are so unique. We're probably seeing people that might be from a few communities over that are also choosing to live here. And so the multifamily housing being developed proximate to transit, this is something that is very special. It's now a big deal in the Commonwealth. It's a big deal in the Commonwealth, and many of you have read articles about the MBTA MBTA communities and the zoning requirements that the Commonwealth has for any community that is served by, whether it's subway, bus, and us commuter rail, or if you're not directly served, you can touch a community that is. And so there's quite a number. I think it's over 120, I think, different communities in the Commonwealth that are considered MBTA communities, and the Commonwealth wants to see each of those communities devise zoning changes that provide for a density, in this case multifamily kind of apartments or condos, density proximate to transit. And so fortunately for us, it wasn't a heavy lift, because we, long before the Commonwealth came up with those requirements, we had already started to work on repurposing of buildings that were in the dense downtown and mixed-use projects. And with each one that gets successfully executed, we see a number of other parties looking to do another one in another location. And that's certainly what has been occurring while the Morin Square Apartments was under construction. And so during because it was approximately 2 years, if you all recall, that project was under construction. And during that time, we have 3 different buildings, and I'll have them a little later in my presentation just as examples. These are smaller scale, but mixed use, downtown buildings, all historic, repurposed, residential in the upper stories, commercial on the ground level, and once finished, they quickly leased up, both residentially and commercially. So the quality housing stock is very, very important, and it's not something that we're going to be done with. It's an ongoing thing, but we're going to be mindful of it all throughout the work that we're doing. So let me shift a little bit further to the sub-goal we call mix of businesses. And this is not just the downtown now. We're now talking citywide and thinking about the types of businesses that we want, and when we have vacant or underutilized sites, what sorts of businesses would go on those sites. When we did the zoning overhaul, it was a citywide comprehensive overhaul, and we looked at a lot of the properties that were either dormant or underutilized, and we were very, very deliberative, very intentional about the zoning designations of sites that were either in transition or they hadn't reached their fullest potential. So the mix of businesses that we seek, whether it's dining, whether it's commercial recreation, whether it's manufacturing, because we have always had manufacturers, the types of manufacturing has vastly changed. And there's actually a term that you hear of now, artisanal manufacturing. And so often when we hear that term, it often means smaller, maybe almost like craftspeople. And there's a movement, not just in Fitchburg, but I'm reading more and more about it amongst urban planners, that artisanal manufacturing, small scale makers of things, that is another driver of economies. And so while we're nurturing an arts and culture identity, some of the artisans are actually artisanal manufacturers of things. We have a few of them already present here in Fitchburg, and just during the course of the last 3 years, I can think of 2 different downtown properties that changed hands. The parties that bought them were from Eastern Mass, and they bought the property. They're bringing their artisanal manufacturing business here, and they don't know that much about our city yet, so they're still getting to know us. But that's just another example of the types of businesses that we're seeking to retain and also to attract. Another thing I wanted to add under mix of businesses, because I think it really deserves some credit for the work that's been going on, is Fitchburg Airport. And Fitchburg Airport is a municipal airport, as many of you know. Over the past several years, a number of improvements and upgrades have been bringing that airport into the 21st century for the aviation users who use it. So the primary runway has been elongated and improved. What was a crosswinds runway is no longer needed, so that's been abandoned. And some of the land that was the crosswinds runway now is open for development. So Fitchburg Airport is certainly is operational, and it's doing well with its aviation customers, but it's also an area of the city where we're going to see some more development occur. Now, some of it will be aviation-related development, and that's stipulated by the airport master plan that was approved by both the FAA and MassDOT Aeronautic. But some of the land at the airport where the former runway was is not suitable for aviation. And so we just recently, about a year ago, did a conceptual planning analysis of what types of development could go there, once again, to nurture the economy, but the airport is something to keep your eye on. We're very, very lucky to have a municipal airport and to have one that is bringing all sorts of different features that really help it to not just be profitable, but also to be very modern. The private aviators that fly in and out, oftentimes they're flying in at night, and now there's a self-serve fueling feature. So we are now an airport where those parties know that this is where they can come even in the later hours, and they can actually get fuel and things. That was not the case years ago. We have a new administration building, as many of you know, and that was constructed about 5 years ago, and that certainly helps to keep the airport staying up with the times. So mix of businesses. One other sector, and I do want to add this because there's a timeliness to it, the healthcare sector, or medical and healthcare sector, was one that the consultant in this planning process emphasized to us we have a lot of. And it isn't just those healthcare institutions that have settled and remained at the former Burbank campus, because there's quite a bit of healthcare there, but some of the smaller medical practices, of which we have quite a few as well. So there's a lot of healthcare related employers and ventures and companies here in Fitchburg. So the healthcare sector was one that we were advised we really want to continue to nurture, make the most of. We have a number of employees working in that sector, and we want to make sure that we continue to grow that sector. Now, and this is a little bit more current news that everyone's following, of course, who knows, perhaps pursuing getting a birthing center to be somewhere in Fitchburg, now that it becomes more obvious that the Leominster Hospital's maternity care is not going to remain despite all of the advocacy, which is quite unfortunate. But it's something for us to think about. Who knows? We're going to continue to work on that and see. But if the region is in need of that type of service, and we have an identifiable medical and healthcare sector, that's certainly yet another type of use that we might want to consider. Let me move on to a sub-goal that we call distinct neighborhood commercial districts. Now, that's a lot of words, but what it really means is, and you know it when you're in these different districts, we're blessed by having a number of different commercial areas, and they have a neighborhood feel. And the businesses in them, sometimes they're very walkable, they're often patronized by people in the immediate neighborhood, but also people that drive to it, whether they're restaurants, little corner stores, and service businesses, and so on. So the distinct neighborhood commercial districts, that's something that we have and some communities don't. And so we already have that. That's part of our history. That's who Fitchburg is. We want to play to that strength. And so part of what these actions that are in this particular sub-goal are really recognizing that we have distinct neighborhood commercial districts. What do we need to do to preserve them, to make sure that the businesses that are in those districts can thrive? And the zoning overhaul work that we did really was with that in mind. We wanted to make sure our neighborhood commercial areas have neighborhood commercial in them rather than things, sometimes automotive uses or something, not repair, but, used car lots or something like that. Different things that may not really belong in a neighborhood commercial district, we're now giving a lot more thought to, which is very helpful. The other thing about neighborhood commercial districts is kind of the look and the feel. And so we often call it high-quality design, but what we're really talking about is the dimensions of certain buildings and how they fit. When signage goes in, what does it look like? And when property owners have dormant businesses, are the signs from those dormant businesses still present? All of these things factor into how a neighborhood commercial district feels. So we want to, the work is never done, and we're going to continue to be mindful of all this type of these actions, and I'm not going to read all of them individually, but I would encourage you all to do so. Now, if I was going to step back and say, of the work that has been achieved in neighborhood commercial districts, some of the things that still remain, things that was identified in the plan that we definitely want to work on, but there's still a lot of work left to do. It really, one thing that really came out loud and clear was gateways. And gateways, we often mean, your path leading you either into certain districts or ultimately into the downtown. The looks of our gateways, and it goes beyond wayfinding signage, it's sort of the quality of the streetscape, lighting, and so on. And so we want to make sure that leading into different commercial districts, the sense of arrival, the look and the feel of it, we really want it to be appealing. And so in any of the districts where that's still a challenge, that warrants more attention. And so that gateways and the look and the feel of entrances into districts, the lack of signage. And I know sometimes it may seem maybe obvious or so on, but when you're in a neighborhood commercial district, but there's no sign saying the name of the district, if you weren't born here, if you haven't lived here a long time, you won't know until someone tells you, unless we've often been in communities that says, welcome to, and so we don't have that in any of our districts, not even in the downtown. But I mean, if you were to enter Gleghorn, or if you were to enter Park Hill area, we don't yet have sort of these arrival kind of signs that really define districts. And that's something that it's suggested is best practice. It's something we'll want to think about as we want to continue to strengthen and support our neighborhood commercial districts. There are some types of signs that go beyond wayfinding and beyond gateway signs, and I wanted to just mention them because they did get articulated in this plan, and you see them in other places, but we don't really have them here yet. One is historic district signs. In the downtown, there are several historic districts that have already been approved, and they've been approved for a while, some of them. And yet, other than maybe sometimes you'll see a plaque on a certain building, and if you look really closely in the fine print, you might see a mention of a district, but you have to be almost standing right next to it. And so when you enter into parts of our downtown that are specific historic districts, I'll give you a case in point. Morin Square, historic district. And because of that district being formed and approved both by the Commonwealth and the National Park Service, that enabled the Morin Square Apartments project to access certain types of funding and so on. So, and there will be other projects that will occur in a place like Morin Square. But when you come into Morin Square, other than us knowing it's Morin Square, there's nothing necessarily saying that yet. So that's something to think about, historic district signs. And then also place naming signs. And once again, not to sound too obvious, but we have some very special, often historic features or physical forms that make us who we are. When you are at the Upper Common, we know it's the Upper Common. We know that. But if you're not from around here, if you're a visitor, if you're a new student at FSU or whatever, you won't know until you hear a local refer to it in that way. And the same thing with the Rollstone Boulder. The Rollstone Boulder has a plaque, and if you stand close enough to it, you can read some of the details about its history and so on. But those types of elements, and those are just a few examples, in other communities, some of their most significant kind of standout features have a place naming sign. Now, I'm not suggesting that would occur at every feature that we have. We would probably want to be deliberative about it. But right now, we don't have place naming signs, I don't think, at any of our special features. So it's something to think about. It was called out in the plan. It came up in distinct neighborhood commercial districts, but it's something that I just wanted to put out there to consider. Just a few more categories, and then I'll be kind of wrapping up my talk. Commercial, recreation, and arts and culture. And we, like I told you earlier, those were merged together. So it is that is a goal kind of together, commercial recreation, arts and culture. The reason they were put together in part is because these two things have the ability to attract visitors, to attract tourists. They're for us too, but I mean, that was one of the reasons that they were put together. Within commercial recreation, the notion of recreational tourism is something that's very popular throughout the country. And we're fortunate to have a number of businesses that actually are quite active in commercial recreation. Probably the most obvious one, because it's large, is Game On. Game On Fitchburg, relatively new. They actually had a long period of site development. They actually formally opened up fully during, I believe, the second year of the pandemic, and now, you know, maybe between year 2 and year 3 of the pandemic, and now they're fully operational. That's a commercial recreation business. And so those visitors that come, some of them tend to stay overnight because some of the tournaments that family members are involved in are for more than one day. So that type of a facility, commercial recreation, but it's a source of visitorship or tourists. And so that's a very grand scale form of commercial recreation. We also have smaller ones. Mully's Indoor Golf Lounge or the 978 Disc Golf Retail Shop. These are commercial recreation businesses. And so part of what is a reason for us to nurture more of them, believe it or not, is our unique topography and what our city looks like and how it's arranged. In our outer periphery, we have a lot of conservation lands. We have, you know, Flat Rock Audubon. We have all sorts of trails and things. And so we are a city that already has a lot of recreational assets. We know that, and we use them because we're here. But guess what? Other people want to come here to use them too. And that's a source of visitors, commercial recreation tourism, and then that can be turned into customers, whether it's for our dining businesses or our service businesses and so on. So commercial recreation as tourism, something that's going to come up again and again. Now, the other aspect of this particular goal, arts and culture, it's very, very significant in our city. Arts and culture has been for the groups that have been working diligently on downtown revitalization, arts and culture emerged as one of our new defining identities quite some time ago. And it isn't just because we have the Fitchburg Art Museum, although that's probably one of the most obvious reasons why. We're blessed to have an art museum that's accredited, very high quality, and very well run. It brings cultural tourists, visitors who come just for those events and things that go on at the museum. It also enriches us. Anyone who lives or works or grows up in Fitchburg has the access to really high quality art-related programming right in our own hometown. So arts and culture, starting with the art museum, but then actually expanding even beyond it. And so, as we know, because Fitchburg Open Studios is a great example, we have a lot of artists in our midst that live throughout the city. And so, as Fitchburg Open Studios, which has been a tradition for quite a few years now, not all of those artists are right in the downtown. So often when you look at the map of who's exhibiting, they're all over Fitchburg. So we have a lot of creatives who have chosen to live here, who have settled here. We also have this accredited art museum. We also have a number of businesses that are rooted in arts and culture. And by being a university city, some of the arts and cultural programming that, whether it's lectures, performances, and things that universities bring into the mix, we also get to enjoy. And then the university's plans to restore and bring back to life the historic Fitchburg Theater as a regionally significant performance theater space. That also further strengthens the arts and culture aspect of this particular goal. And so, as we focus on the work that remains within this strategic plan, a number of the arts and culture-related actions, I'm not suggesting we're done, but what was really refreshing was to see how many of them we at least are actually in motion and working on. Case in point, the former B.F. Brown Junior High School, which is now being, as you all know, redeveloped and repurposed as a three-building campus, live workspace for creatives, and we use that term creatives because it isn't just fine artists. It might be photographers and writers and musicians and a variety of different folks in the creative realm. When we have, and this will be approximately 68 apartments, in the downtown, proximate, right next to the art museum, by having that many creative households become residents in our downtown, that is going to be catalytic to our downtown and the broader city's economy, because creatives, whenever they settle, they tend to spawn businesses and collaborate with one another and so on. So the economic benefit that Fitchburg is going to gain by having the Fitchburg arts community and the residents that are going to settle there and the types of co-work kind of makerspace that will be within that facility and so on is going to be tremendous. As many of you know, the construction had been, different aspects of it were being worked on for a while, but now the full construction commenced this summer. And so every time you go past the perimeters of the site, you're going to see an awful lot going on, which is great. Stay tuned. But the Fitchburg arts community is now causing Fitchburg to be looked at by people way beyond North Central because it's so unusual, because it's so unique. And we haven't even seen the full benefit of what it'll be like when the residents are living there. So stay tuned on that. But arts and culture, commercial recreation as a pair of defining activities that is going to continue to be part of our identity, and we're certainly going to continue to nurture them each. I would say that as far as the goal sections, and then I'll do a little bit more at the tail end on some of the actual projects that have been happening, because this is very technical, what I'm going through, but I want to give you some live examples of a lot of what we were talking about. The last of the 8 goal areas, transportation. And transportation is extremely important, and it takes on many forms. The broadest statement that the plan has is make transportation into and around Fitchburg easy, fun, affordable. So that's kind of in a broad sense, but what it really means is we're lucky, particularly in our downtown, but even in West Fitchburg with the Wachusett Station, we're so fortunate to have multiple modes of transportation already present. We know of a number of communities, both in our region and beyond, they wish we had what we already have. So how to make the most of it is really what this section is all about, and also paying attention to some of our infrastructure, the current needs and kind of future needs to make sure that they support the economic development goals we have for ourselves. So making Fitchburg increasingly pedestrian and cycling friendly. We've done a lot to achieve that, but there's a lot more work to do. I would argue that when Phase 1 of the Twin Cities Rail Trail opened up a summer ago, that was a big step forward for us as far as both, it's a shared path, so it's not a bike path, it's for walking and cycling. So that's amazing. When the Main Street Boulder Drive conversion to two-way travel was completed in the summer of 22, that brought with it a bike lane along Boulder Drive and much improved safety for pedestrians as they go through our downtown, being able to cross streets with lights and things so that getting from one side of the street to the other, which seems simple enough, but if people were driving too fast, it wouldn't be a pedestrian-friendly zone, and that was one of our challenges before that type of roadway improvement was implemented. So transportation is extremely important when it comes to our economic development goals. And then as far as the fact that we have MART, our regional, Montechusett Area Regional Transit, our bus service, aren't we lucky that our downtown with the intermodal transportation building is the hub for MART's network in the region? So once again, we've got MBTA rail and bus right in our downtown. Other communities wish they had what we have, and the type of alternatives, if someone's a senior, maybe they're not driving anymore, to be able to get around Fitchburg without a car. It's something that's absolutely doable already. What we're seeking to do is make the most of what we have. So some of the actions in the transportation section, particularly with regards to our public bus service, really, and this is work still to be done, spoke to how to engage more ridership, because we have the routes, and sometimes, you know, if there was more engagement of people using them, we might even have longer hours or more extensive routes and so on. So the fact that we have the bus service is amazing, and some of the work that is articulated yet to be done is to better understand what would cause people to use the MART bus service more. And when I say people, I don't just mean, you know, our residents throughout the city, but also the university, whether it's the students or the faculty. What might engage them to use our public bus service more? So these are all things related to transportation, some of the work that is still to be done, but recognizing that we're extremely lucky to have multiple modes of transportation options, and we certainly wish to make more of that. As far as roadway maintenance, and I know this is something that is top of mind for pretty much everybody, and so residents are quite focused on it, and businesses are too. And so when we think of the roads in our city and resources and how to make sure that our roads can be well maintained or serve our needs and so on, and also when visitors come, we want them to, you know, be able to get to our city without challenges, and for us to attract people that want to be here. So the condition of our roads is very, very important, and so the goals that have been, or the actions that have been articulated in the section about roadways, it really speaks to us planning future roadway projects in what's called the Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP. This is a regional plan that the Commonwealth has us get projects onto. This is how we get funding to do some of our more major transportation projects. And right now, the John Fitch Highway work that has been going on for a couple of years. It started during the pandemic, and I was just speaking with our DPW commissioner earlier today just to get myself a little update on the status of things. So what began as a project regarding resiliency on John Fitch Corridor, we've been able to expand it to really thinking about pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, people being able to use that corridor who might not drive, or young people being able to cross from one side of the street to the other after they go to the movies to get a snack and not feel that that's a car-oriented corridor only. So design work is underway right now to position the John Fitch Highway project to get onto this transportation improvement plan. So that's a great example. It takes time. These things do not happen overnight. That leads to funding. Then we can do the types of improvements that we want. One of the things that was articulated in the plan, and this is for us to really think about, Fitchburg needs to develop a pipeline, if you will, of several priority transportation projects where some of the early stage engineering design has been done to the point where they're kind of waiting in the queue. And that's something we probably have been doing more one at a time. So the plan had suggested, to the degree it's possible, to think about a few of these major transportation improvement projects, I don't want to say at the exact same time, but building up a pipeline of projects waiting in the queue. And an example of this, a project that doesn't exist yet, but we certainly have it in our sights, and we've been competing to try and get some grant funding from the Commonwealth to do proper analysis, would be the Route 12 Water Street Corridor. That's a great example because it's a gateway corridor, so it's coming in from Route 2 and beyond. And when you think of the infrastructure, we're not just talking about the paved surface that roads are on, sidewalks, lighting, and it's also now getting a lot more attention visually because it's right next to the rail trail, and lots of people are using the rail trail. And so the Route 12 corridor is a great example of a transportation project in the making, and yet we haven't yet begun because, we're seeking to get the type of funding that would enable us to do a proper study. So those types of corridors, thinking of where they are in our city, these are primary roads that get heavy travel. They're often considered, and the Commonwealth likes this, they're connectors between communities, and that way it affects more than one community, and that often gives roadway projects priority. So anyway, I've been going on quite a bit, and I apologize. Like I said in the beginning, I would encourage everyone to take time to slowly read through the details, because there are 183 different actions color-coded on those that we've been working on, those that are yet to be worked on. But I just wanted to remind you of those 8 broad goal areas and then the actions within them. So what does it all mean? I have a recommendation, and it's just for us to think about. It's certainly just an idea. The plan's original duration was intended to be approximately 5 years. That's a typical round number when you have these types of strategic plans for about 5 years. My argument is that the 5 years that this plan has been live, for at least a year and a half of it, from about I would say mid-2020 to late 21, everything that was going on economically due to the pandemic really was not typical. And what was going on with businesses, what was going on in our lives, how people were, behaving, everything was virtual. So rather than say 5 years is up, plan is done, or something like that, my recommendation is to extend the implementation period for this plan, as was written, for at least another year or two. And then I'm just kind of throwing it out there to think about, because we have some things you'll see as you look through the detailed actions that still are yet to be tackled. And we didn't get the full heft of the 5 years because of that year and a half, which was the most difficult part of the pandemic. So that's something that I just wanted to put out there as a possible recommendation. Another thing to think about, and it's not necessarily saying we need to rewrite the plan, but the world changes, and communities are very fluid, and opportunities come up that didn't even cross our minds, a number of years ago. So there are a few items, and I just listed a few, just 3 of them actually, but there are more, things that are new-ish that didn't necessarily occur to us when the plan was adopted, but things have changed. And one would be the changing demographics in Fitchburg, which is really exciting. We often, before the 2020 census came out, we often said, well, we're about 25% Latino. We're now 30%, actually a squeak bit more than 30% Latino. That's actually fantastic, particularly from an entrepreneurial standpoint, and we're seeing it as businesses open up. So we have no mention of our well, there's very light mention, probably more in the Trends report, which was a companion piece to this plan, but really embracing an ethnically diverse business community that reflects our demographics. I think that might be something that maybe we don't have to change the plan, but keep that in our minds as we're doing the work, because our demographics are taking on a new flavor, and we want to make sure that our businesses are reflective of that. So that's one thing. Another is the cannabis industry. And our cannabis ordinance was being adopted because once that industry became legal at the state level, municipalities had to adopt their ordinance. That was all going on while this plan was kind of being crafted. So when we knew that it was going to be a new industry, but it was intentionally silent on it only because we didn't really understand how it was going to play out and how might it flourish in our community. It certainly falls under a form of manufacturing, and when I say that, I'm speaking of the cannabis cultivation, not so much the retail stores, but the cultivation. So if that's the case, and here we are, several years later, we have quite a few cultivation facilities that have turned into very large employers. Several of them are quite significant, and the economic development that comes from that industry in our community is also starting to become more significant, so much so that annually, when we're at our tax classification hearings and hearing the assessing team provide updates on growth and this and that, we're now starting to see that industry, that sector, as part of where growth is coming from. And so it's something for us to think about. There isn't any mention outwardly of that sector in the plan, and yet it's now becoming much more of a part of our economy. So it's something we might want to think about, not so much changing the plan, but just recognizing how do we harness what the cannabis industry can do for us as far as jobs creation, or commercial tax base and so on. So I wanted to put that out there. And then one last one, which wasn't really on our radar as much when the plan was adopted, but it certainly became a thing after the hard lockdown. The prolonged spike of e-commerce, and this is way beyond Fitchburg, way beyond Massachusetts, all throughout the country. In commercial real estate, there are three what they call asset classes. There's industrial, retail, and office. And office and retail, for a long, long time, were always kind of the superior ones that maybe had higher value. But the pandemic had a way of turning everything on its ear. Now, communities that have lots of office parks and things have had to think about repurposing them. Communities that had large retail malls have had to think about repurposing them. And buying things online has led to a tremendous uptick in the development of e-commerce warehouse facilities. So that's not something that was even on our radar when the plan was being crafted, and e-commerce is probably something that will be with us to stay. And I don't just mean us, Fitchburg. I mean, just in America, it's something, it's how people purchase things to some degree. Not everything, because the desire to have interesting retail shops and touching things and interacting with merchants, people still want that. But for some of the more utilitarian purchases, e-commerce seems to be something that will be with us for a while. Now, we did see, and I'm going to kind of shift a little bit through the slides here, we did see the development of the former Simon Saw property at 135 Intervale into an e-commerce facility, and that occurred from when this plan was adopted until now. And so that facility is not yet operational. They're looking to have that operational by 2024, but the construction is complete. So that's an example of one modern kind of state-of-the-art e-commerce facility, and there is a location in the eastern part of the city near the airport where that same developer is looking to do more. So it's something for us to think about. So after kind of those recommendations, we've gone through a lot of the very technical or more dry side. I just wanted to leave you with a few parting thoughts of real things you can sink your teeth into that are happening and that are visual. So Fitchburg, and this is exciting news, in chatting with the CEO of our regional chamber, who also oversees our regional tourism bureau, it was explained to me that Fitchburg has become the top destination for tourists, visitors, that come to North Central. And the obvious reason why is because both Great Wolf Lodge and Game On are huge drivers of visitors. But I don't know if any of us really thought of all the 20-some-odd communities that we think of as North Central Mass, that more people are coming to Fitchburg than any of the others. I mean, that's amazing. Now, What does that mean? How can we harness those visitors as consumers, as customers? And so this is something that is a huge opportunity, and I just wanted to put that out there, whether it's the customers that are staying at Great Wolf, people that are coming to Game On, or some of the other attractions, because there's what's called agritourism, which is when people go to places like Hollis Hills Farm and so on. And then also there's the visitorship or even tourism that's rooted in arts and culture. So whether they're going to the Fitchburg Art Museum or they're going to a performance at Fitchburg State Campus. So arts and culture and then commercial recreation as tourism has helped to propel Fitchburg to be one of the more popular spots where visitors are coming in North Central. Also, another kind of big thought, I'm leaving you with big parting thoughts. Fitchburg's goal that we've set for ourselves to become a regionally significant dining destination, it's taking shape after several years of deliberatively working on it. We're not done, but just in 2023, we have nearly a dozen new eateries. Some of them are sit-down, some of them are casual. Many of them are in the downtown, but not just the downtown. They're throughout West Fitchburg, John Fitch, different places. And there are several that have already gone through their permitting and will be opening before the calendar year end is done. So what this says is the dining sector, we have arts and culture, commercial recreation, the dining sector isn't just for us. It's not just for those who live and work here. It's for people that might live in a town or two away and they don't have the dining scene that we have. So now you've got people coming in for a specific purpose and then maybe staying for other reasons. So the growth in our dining sector, which was something we intended, is now starting to take hold. I also wanted to just touch on super lightly as I wrap up my talk. Recently completed development projects. And when I mentioned the addresses and the locations, you're gonna register, oh, that building. So we spoke about the apartments at Morin Square earlier, 10 Main Street. So that's transit-oriented, mixed-use development, and 44 residential apartments. There are 3 commercial spaces on the ground level. 2 of those 3 have already been leased, and the build-out is occurring. So that's very exciting. That's kind of at a bigger scale. Guess what? There were 3 different smaller scale mixed-use developments that occurred in the downtown. 759, 769 Main Street, 655 Main Street, 805 Main Street. Now, I'm mentioning the addresses, but you would know them by what the building used to be. So 759 Main Street was once Hub International Insurance, and many long-timers would remember other insurance businesses that might have been in there, but that has been beautifully renovated from top to toe. You've got apartments on the upper 2 stories, fully leased, and you've got 2 commercial spaces on the ground level, also fully leased. So that's exciting. 655 Main, what locals call the historic Fitchburg Gas and Light building. Many know it well, beautiful building. That now has 3 residential units in the upper story, and on the ground level, many of you know because you've been there, it's gorgeous, Dario's on Main. So Dario's, which had been on River Street for years, definitely wanted to migrate to Main Street in that space, and now we have a really great fine dining experience. By the way, the proprietor of Dario's, Elmer Melendez, wanted to be there in anticipation of what the Fitchburg Theater is going to be. So see how one thing leads to something else. So that's really exciting. And then 805 Main, which is the building where Joey's Barbershop is in, and right now Rise and Grind, which has been open since the springtime, is a coffee house, cafe, lunch spot, and then upstairs 2 floors of residential apartments. So those types of smaller scale mixed-use development, very successful that's going on. And then major projects underway. Just 2 I'll mention, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. We spoke of the Fitchburg Arts Community, the former B.F. Brown School site. It's actually the main school, an annex, and also what was once the historic stables for the city. Those 3 buildings as a trio being repurposed by nonprofit developer New View Communities. What will result? 68 live-work spaces for creatives, and that's going to have a very catalytic, very positive effect on our local economy because of how creatives tend to spawn other businesses. Just about to launch is the major renovation and expansion of Fitchburg Public Library. We'll be seeing soon the library move into its temporary space at Putnam Place, and the library is going to have new construction and also retaining the mid-century modern main portion. And so that is going to have the types of features that you see in other communities when they've redone their libraries, a very 21st century a series of features, whether it's learning lab, makerspace, teen rooms, community rooms. Libraries have become an extension of people's living rooms and also a coming together place. The fact that our library is, I'll call it like an anchor tenant in our downtown, if our downtown were a mall, to have a library right on Main Street in such a prominent place, when this project is completed, there will be a whole other set of reasons why people will come into the downtown to take full advantage of not just the use of books and lectures and things like that, but some of the other programming that has always gone on at our library, but now the facility is going to catch up with the sophistication of the programming that our library has had for quite a while. Last little teaser. On the near horizon. There are quite a few projects on the near horizon, but I just want to tease with a few that are kind of big and bold. The Ivor Johnson former historic factory buildings. This is on River Street, 87 through 91 River. The property owner developers have been working on the designs for quite a while. Very exciting. So 3 buildings being repurposed residentially. They're branding it as Ivor Mills, and part of what they're putting together right now is what is often called their financing stack. And the reason it's called a stack is there's many layers to it. But anyway, stay tuned. The Ivor Mills project is going to be extremely exciting. We saw when the yarn mill went in, which is just opposite on the other side of the Nashua. And so stay tuned, because that part of River Street is going to really come alive when you get that many households living in the Ivor Mills. 280 to 288 Main Street, the corner of Main and Water, we often think of it as the former Santander Bank building, has been vacant for a while. There is a developer very interested in discussions and has it under agreement to repurpose it in what we call mixed use. Commercial on the ground level, residential up above, and it's such a defining building because of its shape and its height. We can see it from all around. So seeing that building come back to life is going to be quite exciting. There is a pair of proposals going by the name Gateway Apartments. It's already gone through the planning board process, the vacant parcel next to Rollstone Church on Main Street, and then a parcel behind the CVS on Snow Street. Those 2 properties, Phase 1, Phase 2, new construction, transit-oriented apartments in the downtown. So that's something to stay tuned for. And then last but not least, the new owner of the former Monk's Joe paper factory. That property changed hands during the pandemic. This visionary individual is rebranding it. His name for the campus is Turning Point, but what his vision is biotech manufacturing. And so this is something that we know the Commonwealth wants to retain, manufacturing. We have a lot of biotech research that goes on in Eastern Mass and in Worcester and places in Devons. But being able to retain the manufacturing in Massachusetts rather than elsewhere is something that the state very much wants. And so this gentleman is seeking to position the Monk's Joe factory to be a location for that, and he already has his first tenant. And we had the opportunity to meet that individual and hear about his business recently. So stay tuned. These are things on the horizon, but I didn't want to leave you just with the implementation of our plan. And what I'd like to do is open it up for questions and possibly any discussion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bohart. I greatly appreciate the time and effort that's gone into this presentation, and it was very informative. Great, thank you. I would like to open it up to my fellow councilors if they have any questions or comments. Councilor Cruz, you said you had?
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Van Hazinga. And I also, it's really thorough presentation as always. You do a terrific job, so thank you very much for the presentation and for the work that you put into the city. It's clear that you're making a difference, so thank you very much. I do have a few questions, and it's mostly about sort of, what's stopping us? Because I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think we should support a college town. We should open up public transportation from the university downtown. What is stopping the city? What is the impediment that prevents us from accelerating these plans that, for the most part, I think we sort of have a consensus that we agree with? But these have been plans for a number of years now, and we're stalling a little. I think we can agree, right? What's stopping us?
It isn't a singular thing, because so many of the larger projects that I was speaking about, they're complicated. We could use the Moran Square Apartments as an example, because there was historic repurposing of historic buildings and all that entailed, new construction, the permitting, and then also assembling, and this is the developer's challenge, assembling the financing partners, some of it because they were using both historic tax credits and low-income housing tax credits. Those mechanisms take a while to get syndicated and so on. So in that instance, I don't know if that could have happened any faster. But maybe stepping away from those bigger development, and same thing with the Fitchburg Arts Community. Mark Doan of Newview has had the patience of a saint, because, and tenacity, maybe that's a better word than patience, because there were so many twists and turns, but he kept his focus on what he was seeking to do and how special that property was and the opportunity to create it. I don't know in the case of the Fitchburg Arts Community if that could have been done any faster. And I don't think, this is just my opinion, I don't think a for-profit developer maybe would have been able to tackle it. And Liz might be able to have additional thoughts on this as well, because she's worked so closely with Newview, particularly on that project. But we're blessed to have a nonprofit developer with experience, because let's not forget, Newview was the redeveloper of 470 Main, and so they've done all sorts of housing in different places, but this is not someone who's doing it for the very first time, thank goodness. So those types of projects are going to be slower by definition, and often because they have challenges and things, they're going to be harder for us to fast track. But I bet you your question isn't necessarily referencing just those big projects.
Well, no, it's my question is really concerned with the university and transforming us into a college town. I went to UMass Amherst, and that is a college town. Obviously, it's a much bigger university.
Definitely.
It's a much bigger university, of course, but that's a college town. And that is a town that the economy is driven by the students through and through.
Absolutely.
And there is a bus system. I parked my car at the beginning of the semester. I didn't touch it till the end because buses took us everywhere. So what is the missing link between us and MART, or whoever it might be, getting these sort of initiatives going? This sort of bringing this transportation from the university downtown and having a solid, bus system, for an example. What is preventing us from? Are we missing a middle person from the university to the city? Do we need someone in the middle to help this process through? Do we need more initiative from the university itself to be a partner, a larger partner than it's been? And it has been a decent partner, but we can always improve. We can improve. They can improve. What are we missing in this specific aspect?
My first thought in listening to your question was, we Fitchburg, seek to capture the interests and the activity and the spending power of the students and the faculty too, but particularly the students. And so even though we can think about the transportation aspect and, might they use MART? Might they use MART to come downtown or something? The truth be told, North Street is gorgeous. And with the lighting and things, I've walked down it many a time at night to CVS from the heart of campus. And so I don't think the journey from the university to Main Street or to the downtown is necessarily the impediment. What I would argue, just at the moment in time we're at right now, is that our downtown is in its earlier stages of being chock-a-block full of all the things that everyone at the university would want. When you go to Keene, you go to Amherst, you go to those kind of places, and you can't help it. You have to go up one side and down the other. There's just so much stuff. You don't want to miss anything. We're still working on that. So I don't want to say that as we fill vacant storefronts, we're going to see more of the students, and it's not until then. I think that we're fortunate, just with the last year or two, the amount of eateries and the range, sit down, casual, this cuisine, that cuisine. So we have a lot more dining activity in our downtown than we did. What I think we very much need is places where music and performances can be enjoyed, particularly in the evening. We have some. We need more. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a big kind of club setting, although we have one or two of those, but it can also be small places where, when the Boulder Pub has performer, it might just be one person. People love it. And the same thing with the Cellar and so on. So being able to see live music with friends after class or after work or things, the more we can have performances, informal, maybe it's spontaneous, in the downtown, that's going to be one of the things that I think will attract them. What will really take us over the hump and then some is when, right in the middle section, not Morin Square, not the Upper Common, but in that middle section where we're still working through vacant storefronts, and a lot of it stems from the quality of the space, and I hate to say it, but a little bit of prolonged neglect that makes it hard for the small business. I'm on the front lines with a lot of the small businesses that are looking for a spot, and they come to meet with me, and I talk them through the landscape. And they see, if they're not from around here, they see all those vacancies. Oh, there's so many choices. And there are. But what they have to also find out kind of one at a time is which space is sized appropriately for what I have in mind, which landlord is a visionary who isn't going to try and have me, the tenant, do the remedial repairs. So it doesn't mean that we can't get all those spaces activated, but I would argue that having a fair bit of vacancy in the middle of the downtown probably works against making all the students just feel like it's a natural. And how could you possibly not come downtown? Because there's so much. Fortunately, the newer eateries that we've had that didn't exist last year, I suspect that's going to cause them to be checking them out. When you think about Rise and Grind and Pauper's Pantry and Dario's, and we have a few others that are about to open within the next month or so. And so that's what people enjoy, is spaces that they can hang out with friends after class and so on.
Mm-hmm. I think just if my weigh in, Councillor, I think the university has been a strong partner in this aspect, and they've made a concerted effort to expand their footprint to downtown with the theater block across the street. And that's an ongoing project, but they're working it in phases, and they have active classroom space here. Students come here to go to class, not the university forces them to come here.
I know.
They have a shuttle bus that drops them off there, that brings them here. Our new restaurant across the street I'm looking at right now, Pauper's Pantry, would not be there without the participation of the university. That they really made that possible because they wanted that space activated, and they wanted an amenity for their students, in addition to the population of the city, for their students to stop and eat, to get lunch while they're here for classes, and to encourage that. So I think that not everything can be solved in one swoop, but it's a long building process, and all these steps build on each other. That there has to be destinations here, and there has to be, people to go to the destinations, and that's where the university comes in, and they're working on both parts of it. So I think it's an ongoing process, and I think the university has been a strong partner, and they share the city's vision about making this possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm aware of the classes that take place across the street and FS Fitchburg State University's involvement. I guess where I have my hang up is sometimes I think that, and I'm guilty of it too, we can be guilty of a chicken versus the egg sort of thinking. You know what I mean? Oh, we need this first, we need that first, and I think that they come together. So, not to call anybody out, but I'm just generally interested in what could we be doing better.
Exactly.
And I think that we have all these great things happening downtown. We have Mama Joanna's about to open up, and we have the Pauper's Pantry. But we're losing stuff too, right? We lost Kingston Island Cuisine recently. And they had that late night music, yes, and they had the DJ, and we lost them. And so, we have to take that into account and figure out what we learned from that. You know what I mean? Because we did invest in Kingston Island Cuisine as well, right?
There's one thing I didn't mention in my presentation, but it's important. We're lucky, we're fortunate that we're a city that has a redevelopment authority. And our redevelopment authority, not the city, but it's like a cousin of the city, a special public entity that has unique powers and the ability to help revitalize districts. In this case, we have an active urban renewal plan for the downtown, and now through the update, a bit of Route 12 as well. It's kind of reaching outside the downtown on Water Street. What's really helpful is there might, and I'm not getting into this, that one, kind of thing, although it's articulated in the plan, the urban renewal plan. Sometimes there might be a few buildings that almost need an ownership change, before we can start to see the kind of catalytic transformation. And I'm not necessarily, saying all of the vacant buildings are of that type, but for those who have had a building in their ownership for a while, and by a while I mean more than 10 years, we have a few in the downtown, they've had it in their ownership for 20 years, and if there's ground floor vacancy in a building that someone's owned for 20 years and they haven't done any upgrades or repairs to it, I think as the years keep passing and it starts to probably fall into more disrepair, it becomes yet more challenging. So I'm not saying that the answer for any of those most challenged buildings is that they all need to be acquired by the redevelopment authority and repurposed and then put back out into the market. I'm not saying that. But we're fortunate that we have a redevelopment authority. We're fortunate that there is an updated and active urban renewal plan. When there is a particular building that really kind of reveals itself to be, one of the challenges, that is, and a case in point is the lot that we often call the Johnsonia lot at the corner of Putnam and Main, because right now it's a grassy patch where the Johnsonia once had been, and then, of course, the fire, and it was demolished. That is a great example. Without the redevelopment authority, it would still be in a holding pattern because the 30 condos, after it was demolished, they were kind of fussing with one another, and I guess the owners scattered. And so even though the majority share condo owner a number of them wanted to sell the property to various developers to get it repurposed, they couldn't deliver a clear title because there was a missing owner or something like that. So the redevelopment authority was able to acquire that property. Ultimately, they'll be putting out for requests for proposals. People often ask, what would it turn into? Probably, I'm guessing, something similar to what was there, which was mixed use, because it was condos, in this case residential up above, commercial down below with a connection to the parking garage, something like that. Of course, it won't be historic because it can't be because that building is gone. But so having a redevelopment authority to tackle some of the most challenging properties is a good thing to have in our pocket and probably to use it selectively. So that's one thought. The other thing I was just going to mention is that, in the near term, we're just beginning, particularly with a lot of the downtown event programming that we do. So much of it is extremely popular and well attended by families. And, when you think of a lot of our downtown events, they happen in the summer or, sometimes in the spring. But when the students are at FSU campus, it's often autumn and winter. And that's not necessarily the time of year that we had been doing so many of our events. So we aren't yet capturing a lot of the students when we have some of the most amazing events in our downtown because they're not around at those times. So thinking through, and this is something we're right in the active throes of, thinking through the kinds of event programming that could go on in the downtown that would be timed during the calendar when students would say, I've got to go to that. That's amazing. I want to go to that. And so not all of our events have to be for families with small children. Having some events that are very purposely, very deliberately for people that might be 18, 19, 20, 25, 30, that I think is very important. And maybe that's another way to get people into the downtown even before all the storefronts have filled up.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're doing a good job of that with the Nashua Brewers Festival and things like that. So I think we're well on our way. I don't think anybody here is advocating for a city-sponsored spree day by any stretch of the imagination. I think we'll leave that to the students. I'm glad you did mention that. You mentioned some of the vacant properties because I think this is another pretty big impediment. And some of these owners that have been, delinquent for 22 decades, years, right? So I guess, we're all in this together, and I firmly believe that. Maybe they're not, right? And so what are we doing with the vacant property registration? Where are we with that? Where are we with 40U, the municipal officer? We voted to approve that a little while ago. How close is that coming to fruition?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
I'll defer to
We don't get many cracks at this, so
She's much
I've
more
got a few of them.
in tune with it. I was kind of on the side as it was happening. But you're right. That is a new tool for us. So how that will play out.
Right. And so I will say, one of the lingering effects of the pandemic that we don't really think about is some of those things that happened sort of globally, like a lot of people moved, changed careers, The community and the city government lost capacity. We lost capacity in a lot of ways, and I think the university had experienced the same thing. In town, experienced the same thing, where there were a lot of people that were retiring or moving on to different careers, and so we had some voids in staff. And so it's taken us a little longer to get things moving, but the vacant property registry is something that the Board of Health has been working on getting into the OpenGov system. And we're at that last leg where now we need to create the informational piece that's going to go out to the public just to roll out the project. So, hopefully we'll be able to get that buttoned up in the next month or so. The 40U process, we actually did, as you know, we requested some funds to get a municipal hearing officer hired as a stipend. When we're going through the process, we realized that there was one more step that needed to happen. There needs to be some formal procedures written and adopted. So we need to now go back, and so our city solicitor is now working on those procedures, and we'll be coming to you folks shortly. But we do have a job description ready. HR has it, and we will be ready to hire for that position. And we know, there are folks that are interested. So, I expect that it won't be an issue with getting applications for that position when the time comes. Whether or not the position is hired in order to roll out the procedures piece, or whether the procedures piece comes first and then the person is hired, is still what we're discussing. Like we had a meeting about it last week. So we're still working on that, but we're absolutely behind the 8 ball with getting that rolled out.
It's quite all right. Just curious more than anything else, because I'm really looking forward to those changes.
Me too.
I think the council really was as well.
And I think the addition of having commercial as a part of what needs to be registered in the vacant property registry will be huge, especially downtown. The whole entire building has to be vacant, but we have a few of those that fall into that category.
Good. I guess one more question, and I guess I'll yield the floor so somebody else can go. And this is kind of random, and I have no clue how it would work, but I was reading up recently on sort of a method to, get these delinquent property owners moving, is to raise taxes exclusively on them by 25, 30, 35%. This is something that's actually being discussed at the state level. Does the city have the ability to do that and say, look, enough of you writing this off on your taxes, you either need to get with the program or you need to get out? Is that an option?
I think that the vacant property registry with the escalating fees was sort of intended to impose that kind of monetary penalty.
Mm-hmm. Is it enough, though, the sort of 500 to 2,000, whatever it was? I don't remember the exact figures.
I wish I could answer the question about whether or not we could legally raise taxes on a vacant property because it's vacant. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm absolutely willing to find that out. It's a good idea if we can.
Okay. I yield the floor. Would anybody else like to go?
Thank you. That was very thorough. I was listening to it as I was driving here, so just so you know, I didn't miss anything. Yeah, I am pretty excited about what I've seen. I mean, I'm just finishing up my 3rd term as city council, and I've seen the changes down here. My son lives out of town, and when he comes up to visit, they're just amazed at the changes they see here. Because when he was going to college, it was during the time when things were beginning to go away. Do you find that the roads are hindering people coming into the city? Because it doesn't seem that way to me.
I can't speak for everyone. What I can relay is what I hear, because I'm so often working with commercial folks, our business community, people thinking of buying something, people thinking of, so I'm not going to speculate about the residential mindset. You probably, as elected officials, probably have a better dialed in on that. But with regards to businesses, there have been some, depending on where they're located, where the condition of our roads was a huge challenge. One in particular, and this is one I spoke of earlier in my presentation, the condition of Industrial Road until it got resurfaced was very serious. before Game On went in, the parties that dealt with it most were those who lived on Victoria Lane and the industrial businesses in the industrial park. But once Game On opened up, and you had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people coming for tournament day and back and forth and so on, that's when I think not just the rough condition being a hindrance, but it actually being unsafe. I had an experience, personal experience, and it wasn't on a game day. It was on a weekday. I went up to Game On to take some pictures of something, and I was coming back, and it was just a typical weekday, noontime, going through the industrial park on a weekday. And I almost got into a head-on collision with someone coming up as I was going down. The reason why, I was minding my business on my side of the street, just driving along, and I saw this car, and they were driving at me in my lane from 100 yards off, and I'm like, what the heck? And what they were doing, this was before the roadway repairs, they didn't, because it was quiet time of day, they were just kind of driving like this to avoid some of the very sizable things in the road. And so that's when I realized that's a problem, because when you have so many out-of-towners coming along that road, I think industrial truck drivers are probably more hardy, and maybe they were able to, their vehicles were probably what led that road to get into that condition. But the point is, passenger vehicles, visitors coming from out of town to a commercial rec facility probably aren't savvy to any of this. And so that's when it wasn't just that it was an irritation or it was, a poor reflection on us. It actually was a safety thing because, people were kind of like driving at each other. So it was a relief to see that road did get resurfaced. I realize it's always hard to know which ones to do, and that's not, for me to deliberate. Smaller businesses, that was an extreme example, Game On. Smaller businesses, particularly those that are in the downtown, I don't hear it as much from them, whether they're talking about their employees or whether they're talking about their customers, possibly because by the time people have come to them to patronize them, they really wanted to come here, and they're going to come here regardless. Right. But I think maybe where our road conditions are going to hurt our commercial interests has to do with visitorship. And I know we don't fix our roads for out-of-towners. That's not why we do it. But out-of-towners don't know. They've never been here before. This is their first time down this road, and so they may do foolish things not knowing what they're getting into. So I think in that sense, some of those businesses rooted in attracting visitors and tourists probably are the ones that would notice the road conditions the most.
I mean, our roads aren't good. I know that. I do know that. I live on a state road, so, and what I understand, it's about to be repaved, and I think it was, the whole street was repaved about 10 years ago, and I just find it a waste of money to repave a road that is in fine condition and not give the money to the cities and towns, that really need it, and it just, but like I said, I see great things beginning to happen here. There's no doubt that we are in the right direction. I talk to people in Dario's coming from Leominster to come to Dario's to eat, and they come every weekend. And I have friends that live in Ashland that are excited about the arts community coming in, and they're trying to get that in their community. So we are being seen throughout the state now. People know about us, and it's not a quick fix. It takes time, but
it's important. Just to restate something I said during the tail end of my presentation, transportation is a goal in the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and within that, infrastructure and roadways is mentioned. So any question of, is it relevant? Yes, it's relevant. It is relevant. Yeah.
Agree.
I will say I had my wedding anniversary last weekend, and my wife and I went out to eat, and we were talking about where we want to go. And we like to go someplace nice, get dressed up, have a good meal. And years past, we've gone into Boston or Providence or Worcester or even recently Leominster with all the restaurants going in there. But we said, you know what, we don't have to anymore. We made a reservation, we went to Dario's, we had an absolutely fantastic meal. And we were so happy we could do that right here in Fitchburg. We didn't have to travel, we didn't have to go anywhere else. And it's great that we have more of these opportunities locally.
One thing I'd like to suggest to the committee is that it's a wonderful segue, what you just said. We, the city, this summer, spring into summer, completed an analysis. This was through a grant from the Commonwealth. It was called a Mass Downtown Initiative grant. They paired us with an economic analysis type consultant. We wanted to get into the mindset of the consumer, and I even took it a step further. The post-pandemic consumer, and if there is a difference, is there a difference how people behave now than they behaved 3 years ago? Well, in some ways, but not in every way. So what we wanted to better understand, we've known for a while, and this even when we did the economic development strategic planning before the plan existed, that consultant identified that we have a leakage problem, and that's that economic term you hear. Leakage is you have consumer spending, locals that live here spending here. But what if, and back when the plan was being devised, the number was, it was an interesting fact. There was a misconception, maybe due to median income or who knows what, that maybe Fitchburg folks don't eat out of the home on food outside the home as much as others. Well, we were Fitchburg folks spending on dining outside the home to the tune of like $90 million a year. That was the good news. Very interesting. The hard part with that, and many of you remember this, was $30 million of that was being spent in Fitchburg, and the rest was leaking to other places. Because at that point in time, we didn't have the range of choices. And it's not that our local residents didn't want to patronize locally, but and this is getting at what you just said, there weren't the range of choices. I want fine dining. I want this type of cuisine. I want that experience. So I'm not saying that we're done, but the range of choices of dining that we have now is vastly better than it was just a few years ago. So we have an analysis report that I would love to present and discuss with the committee, hopefully maybe at next month or something like that, because the findings from it were very interesting. We did a lot of surveying. We really dialed in. Fitchburg State was very, very helpful and very participatory. We were able to survey the students. We were able to survey the faculty. And I know there have been many surveys of this university in the past, but this one, really getting a better sense of where do they spend? Not just about Fitchburg. If you don't spend here, where do you go? How much do you do? What are you seeking? And from that, it's helping to inform us not just about what we seek to attract, but also, in my opinion, it will help our existing businesses to capitalize on the consumers that are here, because if they're somehow missing part of the consumers that they could be attracting, but they didn't even know it. And so that analysis, which is relatively fresh, it just finished up a few months back, so fairly fresh, and we haven't really kind of put it out there yet because we wanted to start by presenting it to you all, the committee, and thus to the council and so on. But it's really good information for us because we want to reduce that leakage of that type of consumer spending and retain more of it here. And then the other thing is the tourism dollar. That's on the upside, of course, which is out-of-towners or visitors coming to our community and spending their dollars here. That's like a bonus. And so that can offset an awful lot of leakage. So the fact that we know we have a lot of visitorship and tourism largely coming to Game On and Great Wolf, but to some other attractions as well, figuring out a way to harness that and make sure that we're getting the full bounce out of that. I think that's all a work in progress, but I'd love to be able to present about that consumer analysis report. I think that might be helpful.
I do. One complaint I do hear, especially people up at Great Wolf, is there's nothing on that side of the city. That's a big one. They have, SS Lobster. They've got the gas station. They got whatever's what's ever in there. So I do know that's sort of a big complaint.
Our West Fitchburg food offerings are modest. There are a few things, and they tend to be a little more grab and go, a little more quick, with the exception of SS Lobster, which is obviously sit down. But I mean, West Fitchburg has a lot of room for more.
Yes.
Yes, most definitely.
And anecdotally, we have been told by mill number 3 that they've gotten a pretty significant bump because of visitors that are coming to Game On and Great Wolf. So they're, I mean, they're always booming with their sandwiches. But I guess
And just a fun little place to go to,
it's a really
too.
cute place, and I think
Place to go to.
it's growing. It's wonderful
Yeah.
to see that business be so successful.
Yeah, I've seen this when I was working in Leominster at a restaurant. We saw this boom as well when there'd be a tournament at Game On. We would get the extra, we'd be packed in Leominster. And I agree that I think that we really, in Fitchburg, we're so close. We're like right there on really flipping this around, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. And you mentioned in your presentation here a meal tax. Now that we are getting so close, and we postponed enacting it years ago, it was something that our former auditor brought up at one point. But something to the tune of $500,000 for essentially pennies on the dollars for people on a meal tax, and it's not a forced tax on everyone. It's someone who can afford to go out and take their family out and can afford less than a penny percentage. Is there any movement on this meal tax possibility?
It's timely that you bring it up, and it was mentioned in the material. When I was first here, when I was new in my role, and I was getting acclimated in things, and I knew we had the local option hotels tax. But I quickly learned these are local option because the Commonwealth gave municipalities some additional ways to generate revenue at a particular point in time when municipalities were certainly in need and eager to do that. And some communities exercised the local option on both. In our case, because of Great Wolf Lodge, we went with the hotels tax, but for various reasons didn't go with the local option meals tax at that time. It was, I don't know if this is still the thinking, but it was explained to me at that time that our dining sector wasn't really big, and in other words, was the timing right? We had a lot of improvement that was needed to get more dining options before we could really feel like that's an appropriate thing to do. Now that we're seeing so many new dining establishments open, it's something that definitely needs to be thought about and revisited. And one of the things that communities often do when they're thinking about it is, and I'll be sure to put together the data so that it's easy to find, to hold and look at which communities have it and which communities don't. And it doesn't mean that scares you off from doing it or not, but I mean, it's always who is and who isn't. And when we see communities very similar to us who have, but we haven't, then that causes us to think, should we? Now, Leominster does not. That was something that they consciously decided not to do. So if we were to embark on a meals tax, we would be a meals tax community next to one that's not. Now, truth be told, because I've worked in other municipalities where the same debate went on, and the truth be told, someone who really wants to dine at this establishment because of its menu and its chef and so on isn't going to say, gosh, that community has a meals tax, I guess I'll eat over here. So, it probably isn't going to affect things dramatically, but it's something that the municipality and the elected leaders would want to really think through thoroughly. Mm-hmm. That's all.
And I think, it really is pennies, right, on the dollar. And when you take a look at something that has success in our community, like a Grubhub, it is not pennies on the dollar. It's like $5 to get your meal delivered when you go down the street.
That's a very good
And no
point.
one, they're still going to get delivered, right? They're still going to pay for it because they want that meal. So it's definitely something to consider. I guess my last question about sort of the dining options and all that stuff. How are we communicating that we have these new options to the public? How are we getting the word out? How are we marketing? How are we being supportive partners with our new establishments?
And by options, you mean new dining? Dining,
yes, yeah.
So marketing what we have, and it's not one of those things that, set it and forget it and one and you're done kind of thing. It's fluid, right? This was just before the pandemic hit. We had started working with realtors. This is when, just before the pandemic, we were starting to see a lot of houses sell You know, we were now, and then it went into overdrive, of course. But before the pandemic, you know, the housing market was quite hot, you know, and our realtors were busy. And we actually put together, Liz led the effort in our department, but it was a collaborative effort. Marketing pieces graphically designed that profiled the dining options, the retail options, you know, the service businesses. And the intent initially was to make sure we provided them to realtors, because when they're showing people Fitchburg houses, the realtors weren't even as savvy as they needed to be about what was here. So, and they're telling people to buy a home, and, you know, we wanted them to be well informed. So that was the first catalyst. And those materials were actually very attractive, but I think there's a lot of lessons learned. And since that was a few years ago, and then the pandemic happened, and then there were a lot of, you know, different things that have occurred. It's time, to answer your question, time for us to refresh that and probably tune it up in a more 21st century way. I just had a conversation earlier this week with my counterpart in the town of Reading. Now, the town of Reading is a little bit north of Boston, kind of near Stoneham, for those that know, you know, a little bit to the north. And they have half our population, so it's a town, and it's not that big. They have a traditional downtown, not as big as ours, but they have some extremely effective marketing, diagrammatic map, shows all the parking, has all the businesses, and it's probably not focused so much on having print copies of it, although that can easily be produced. It's something that lives electronically, because that's how people get their information out, whether it's on their phone, through a QR code or whatever. And it's also important, and this isn't unique to Fitchburg, because the first thing out of his mouth, because I complimented him, you have amazing downtown graphic material. This is really something. He said, we have to keep it up because it's very fluid. They're always changing. They're coming, they're going. And so the fact that tenancies come and go isn't something that we should say only us, only we have them coming. It happens in all downtowns. You know, so if you were to have something that was produced and you put it, you know, kind of in a printed way, and you put it up, you know, sooner produce it, and it's going to be stale because they come, they go, new things are happening. So we need to make sure very carefully when we come up with the latest version of some of our best offerings graphically produced so that everyone can easily digest them, both locals and visitors, we want to make sure it's easy to update like that, because sometimes, you know, and it's how you lay out the map so that you know, have a key map and the names are easy to change and so on. But we want to make sure that we can keep it current so that it's telling the story of everything we've got. And then also, it's easy for both locals and out-of-towners to make sense of. So I think the short answer to your question is it's time. It's time, now that we have a number of really great new offerings, both dining and retail, some interesting retail and service businesses, it's time for us to refresh that and probably do so with a slightly different format.
And if I can just add to that, we've been in discussions regarding different events that could happen, and talking about doing a dining week. So that's something that I know our in-town downtown coordinator would really like to proceed with, is doing a dining week that would be sometime in the fall or in the winter, not necessarily in the summer when the university students aren't there.
Got
So
you.
we're
Yeah,
thinking
I like
about
that. I like that idea. It sounds like we could use an app too.
Yeah,
An
yeah,
app.
Really use an app.
exactly.
I guess I got one. Well, I've got a lot more, but I'm going to have one. I'm going to ask one more. If that's okay with everybody. I know we're getting late here.
That's okay.
Maybe two more. We have so you mentioned the airport. We have the airport. Worcester has seen an incredible, revitalization. A big part of that has been the airport, obviously the airport park and things like that. Has there been any consideration for the airport to open up to like the Port Authority and delivery and things like that, things like UPS and USPS and FedEx and some things of that nature?
One thing I know, in part from talking to the airport manager and kind of and attending a lot of airport commission meetings and kind of getting up to speed and all that, and also just away from work, just personally, I happen to know someone who's a pilot for FedEx, so I know a little bit about the delivery type of. What limits our airport from ever I don't want to say ever, but what limits our airport from being kind of a place where freight comes is the length of the runway. And the length of the runway is not going to be changing when you look at what, now that we've elongated it, and if you think, gosh, could we make it even longer? I don't know. I think we've kind of, when you look at what lies in the outer perimeter beyond it, that might not be possible. So will it ever be something where, it's used in that way? Not in the largest sense, but maybe there might be other, maybe smaller operators that need that sort of thing. And also there's I'm learning more and more about all the different aviation-related businesses that exist. For example, and you're probably aware of this, so that Life Flight, the helicopter business, which is right now in temporary digs because they're about to have the permanent facility constructed there, they will be basing, they were in Worcester, but for a variety of reasons, they really wanted to be here in Fitchburg based on location and strategic and all that. So that's an aviation-related business that will be improving a space at Fitchburg Airport and then providing a service that goes way beyond Fitchburg too. So there are a variety of aviation-related businesses that cluster at airports, and then there's a lot of non-aviation businesses that you tend to see at airports. And so whether it's a restaurant or other types of things, there is a tract of land, part of what was analyzed in that mass development work we did a year ago, that could accommodate a hotel. And we know just from the Game On dynamics, the region doesn't have enough hotel rooms anymore at peak times, because Great Wolf is almost always full, but even beyond that, when Game On is having major tournaments for a series of days, a lot of those visiting patrons to Game On are staying in communities quite a bit further out. So the pandemic slowed down a lot of development types, such as hotel developers, because the hotels really had a financial hit when they had to, either people weren't traveling or with our theme park hotel, they couldn't open for 15 months. So there's going to be a catch-up period while new hotels haven't really been developed lately, but we will need that. And so perhaps that might be something that might get developed in that land that is near the airport. Something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, that would be terrific. You got to think that they'd have to be at the airport and then drive kind of through Fitchburg to get to Game On, right? They'd have to go all the way through everything, and they'd be able to see everything that we have to offer. So
right.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah, I think that's probably enough for me. I got some more, but I think I'll let them sit.
No problem. And the good news, as you could see from the way I did the presentation, I didn't go into every single of those actions. I want you to kind of take your time to chew, digest, read it, but there's plenty of time for added, whether it's at another meeting of this particular committee or even just getting in touch with me with other questions and thoughts you had. And I would encourage not just you, the counselors on this committee, but even the general public watching this presentation or anyone else that I encourage them to get in touch with me or with our department if you have thoughts about economic development or this particular plan and its implementation.
No, it's been terrific. I really thank you both so much for coming. It's been super informative, and it was really a great presentation. And it was nice to my colleagues on the committee to be able to have a nice, open, friendly discussion without too much retaliation and back and forth. This has been very refreshing and nice. I almost don't want it to end, so thank you both so much.
That's great. Any other questions for now? Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. And like I said, both for you counselors that serve on this committee, any of the general public, people watching at home or that might watch this recording in the future, other counselors, I encourage you to get in touch if you have thoughts, questions, ideas. This plan and its implementation, it's never something that, first of all, the plan is not rigid. It's not etched in stone. It's a guide. And also, like I was recommending, when the 5 years since the plan was adopted concludes, which would be next month, we probably want to stay in implementation of this particular plan for a little while longer, not just because the pandemic took a year or two off of our actions, but there's still more to do. And then one thing I didn't add was, so a year or two from now, when we've done that added implementation, what then? Likely, it might be time for us, perhaps, to do another. Because the strategy was based on analysis and a public process from that moment in time forward. And then maybe at a point in the near future, we might want to do it again. And by that point, perhaps a number of the things that are in the works in our city that have economic driver implications might be operational, and that will inform us for the next thing we aspire to.
That is important to not only finish what we're working on now, but also back of our mind to think about what comes next. And,
Exactly.
And what will be the next story for the city in the coming years.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So thank you both
Thank
very
you.
much for coming in. We enjoyed the presentation immensely. This was very informative. It's good sometimes to stop and take a look and say, you know what, where have we come from? Where are we going? How are things going? And it's good to be honest and really take a fresh, honest look at that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.